The sun beat down on the dusty road at midday. Ida Mabel walked steadily, each step kicking up small clouds of dirt that swirled around her feet. The air above the ground seemed to tremble and dance with the heat, warping the distant view into a shimmering mirage. Her mouth was dry with thirst, and her old sandals rubbed painfully against her sore feet, but she pressed on. Walking kept her mind busy, and letting her mind wander hurt far more than the sun ever could. She had set out at first light, holding tight to a single, worn suitcase that contained little more than a spare dress and too many painful memories. Back down the road, the little settlement of San Barollo vanished into the haze, along with the furious voice that had driven her out that very morning. A thief and a liar, Dona Tomasa had yelled. Mabel could still hear it. 10 long years she had spent working for that family, sewing their clothes, patching tears, and scrubbing their floors. Her hands were rough and cracked from a decade of labor. She had stitched their finest gowns, decorated their holiday linens with intricate patterns, and even made the baptismal cloth for their youngest baby. Yet when one small piece of lace vanished, she was branded a criminal. She had no husband, no family to speak for her, no one to stand up for her name. Just the ugly word thief ringing in her ears over and over. She paused by a withered agave plant and sank down to her knees, breathing heavily. The air carried the scent of salt and dry earth. High above, a lone vulture circled slowly, waiting with a dreadful patience. "Please," she whispered, clasping her hands tightly together, "don't let my life end here." And then she heard a new sound, steady and rhythmic, the clop of hooves and the groan of a turning wheel. She looked up and saw a cart in the distance, drawn by a brown horse moving at a steady pace. A tall man held the reins, and a few small shapes were huddled together behind him. Mabel felt a flicker of caution. Strangers could mean danger, but the cart slowed and then rolled to a stop right beside her. The man's face was in the shadow of his broad hat. His beard was tidy but streaked with grey. His shirt was clean but faded, like someone who worked hard and spoke little. "Señorita," he said, his voice low and steady. Mabel shook her head. "Just worn out," she answered. The man stepped down from the cart, his boots leaving clear prints in the soft dust. 5 young girls peeked out from behind him, their faces full of open curiosity. He asked. "South," Mabel said quietly. "Maybe Santa Cruz, maybe just somewhere they don't know my name." He nodded slowly. "That's 20 kilometers at least, on foot. You won't get there before dark." She stayed silent. What was there to say? A small, clear voice broke the quiet. "Papa, she looks so sad," said one of the girls. The man glanced at his daughter, then back at Mabel. "What is your name?" "Ida Mabel," she replied, "just Mabel." He tipped his hat. "I'm Teodoro. I have a ranch a few miles west of here. 5 daughters." He gestured toward the cart. "I could use a hand around the house." Mabel frowned. "You don't know anything about me." He simply shrugged. "No, but I know what it feels like to need a break, a real chance." His words settled deep in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Not with empty sympathy, not with distrust, but with simple, quiet understanding. "What kind of work?" she asked. "Keeping house, some cooking, watching the girls when I'm out with the animals." "You'll have food, a room of your own, and fair wages." Mabel hesitated. "Are you certain? I'm not what most folks expect." Teodoro almost smiled. "Neither am I," he said. One of the youngest girls giggled softly and reached out a small hand. "Come, Senora," she said, "we have chickens." Something inside Mabel broke open then, not from sorrow, but from remembering what simple kindness felt like. She picked up her suitcase and whispered, "All right, I'll come." Teodoro helped her up onto the cart. The old wood groaned under her weight, but none of the children laughed. The smallest one snuggled against her side as they started moving again. The horizon was vast and pale. Mabel held her suitcase close. She didn't know if she was headed toward hope or more heartache, but at least she wasn't standing still. After a while she asked, "Why are the girls so quiet?" "They've seen too many people come and go," Teodoro said. "They don't talk much to strangers anymore." "Then I'll do my best to stop being a stranger." He glanced at her and something like approval flickered in his eyes. The youngest, named Luna, tugged at Mabel's sleeve. "Are you going to live with us now?" Mabel offered a faint smile. "It looks that way." "Good," Luna whispered. "We need someone who sings." Mabel blinked. "Sings? Mama used to sing when it rained. The house doesn't like it when it's too quiet." Those words stayed with Mabel as the cart turned off the main road. The ranch came into view. A wooden house stood alone against the red glow of the evening sky. The fields looked parched, but they seemed to be waiting, patient. Mabel took a deep breath. It looked like a place that wanted to be a home again but had forgotten how. When the cart halted, Teodoro stepped down first, then helped Mabel to the ground. The porch boards creaked under their feet. The air smelled of dried hay and old timber. The front door swung open suddenly, and a teenage girl stood there, arms crossed, her gaze sharp. "She won't last a week," she said in Spanish. Mabel met her look and gave a small nod. "Maybe not, but I'll give it everything I have." The man's silence spoke louder than any words could. He showed her to a small room with a simple bed and one window that faced the rolling hills. "It isn't much," he said. "It's enough," Mabel replied softly. That evening she made a stew from what she could find, some beans, onions, and a pinch of dried herbs. The girls lingered in the hallway, half curious and half unsure. Mabel served them first, then Teodoro. No one spoke much until Luna whispered, "Gracias." For the first time in days, Mabel smiled. Later, as moonlight crept across the floor, she sat alone at the kitchen table, listening to the wind outside. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting, just as she had been, and though Mabel didn't know it yet, that long season of waiting was nearly over. Morning arrived with a rooster's crow and the smell of damp earth. A little rain had fallen just before dawn, just enough to settle the dust. Ida Mabel got up before anyone else. Her body ached, but it was the good kind of pain that reminded her she was alive. She tied her hair back with a ribbon, washed her face in cold water, and went outside. The garden behind the house was a mess of weeds and forgotten tools. She knelt by a patch of dry soil and ran her fingers through it. It was tough and stubborn, but it wasn't dead. "We'll start with you," she whispered. She began clearing away broken branches, her hands moving steadily. An hour passed before she heard footsteps. It was Noah, one of the middle girls, the quiet one with dark curls. She stood there holding a glass of water. "Papa says you shouldn't work so early," she said. Mabel smiled. "The earth doesn't wait for anyone, Noah." The girl didn't answer, but she left the water beside Mabel and went back inside. By the time the sun was higher, Mabel had cleared an entire corner of the garden. Sweat traced a path down her neck, and her dress stuck to her back, but her heart felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, she had a purpose. Inside, the oldest girl, Leah, watched from an upstairs window. Her jaw was tight, her expression hard to read. In her hands, she held a small wooden box. She opened it just a crack to see inside, packets of old seeds her mother had saved. Then she closed it tight again. By noon, Mabel returned to the kitchen. The house held the faint scent of soap and wood smoke. She made coffee and started lunch, frying plantains and eggs, warming fresh tortillas. When the girls came down, they hesitated before sitting. Mabel didn't push them. She set the food on the table and said simply, "Eat." They did, even Leah, though she wouldn't meet Mabel's eyes. After the meal, the girls scattered to chores or the porch. Mabel washed dishes at the sink. She could feel the house watching her, testing her, wondering if she would stay. In the late afternoon, she found Leah outside near the clothesline, that same wooden box in her hands. "What's that?" Mabel asked. "Nothing," Leah said quickly. "Just something my mama left." Mabel nodded. "You miss her." Leah's voice was sharp. "You wouldn't understand. Maybe not the way you do," Mabel said, "but I know what it's like to miss people who should have stayed." Leah looked at her, startled by the calm in her voice. "You talk too much," she muttered. "Maybe," Mabel said, "but only when it's important." Later, while sweeping the floor, Mabel heard soft crying from upstairs. She went up quietly and found Sarah, one of the younger girls, sitting by the window with her knees pulled up to her chest. "Bad dream?" Mabel asked. Sarah wiped her face. "Leah says Mama left because we were too much trouble." Mabel knelt beside her. Mamas leave because grown-ups make poor choices, not because of their children. Sarah sniffled. Do you think she'll ever come back? No, Mabel said softly, but you will be all right anyway. Sarah leaned into her, small and trembling. Mabel put an arm around her and hummed an old tune her own mother used to sing. The girl's breathing slowed, and for a moment the air in the room felt almost safe. That night, after everyone was asleep, Mabel went back outside. The moon hung low and the garden looked silver. She carried a lantern and the wooden box Lee had left on the porch. Inside were seeds, beans, marigolds, squash, and one packet marked Flower Day. Mabel smiled and began pressing them into the softened soil. By morning, Lee found her still there, covered in dirt. What are you doing? She demanded. Starting something new, Mabel said. You can't just take her seeds. I didn't take them, Mabel replied. I'm giving them a chance to live. Lee stood silent for a long moment. Then she crouched down beside her. She never planted them, she whispered. Maybe she was waiting for the right season, Mabel said. Lee handed her another packet. Then let's see if they still remember how to grow. Together, they worked until the sun burned through the morning clouds. When they finished, 6 neat rows stretched across the garden. The other girls came running to see. Luna clapped her hands. Sarah said it smelled like rain was coming. Noah brought a pitcher of water and carefully watered the rows. When Teodoro came back from the fields, he stopped in surprise. What's all this? Our garden, Mabel said. Lee stood up straight. Mine and hers. Teodoro nodded, his face hard to read. It will need a fence. Rabbits will get in. We'll build one, Mabel replied. That evening, laughter found its way back to the dinner table. It was hesitant and quiet, but it was real. Luna told a silly story about a chicken that tried to sit on a cat. Sarah pretended not to laugh, but her shoulders shook. After the dishes were done, Mabel stepped onto the porch. The wind carried the soft sound of a new wind chime she had found in the shed. Teodoro joined her, leaning against the railing. You've done more here in 1 week than anyone since she passed, he said quietly. Mabel didn't turn to look at him. I didn't come to fix a house, Teodoro. I came because I had nowhere else to go. He looked at her, his gaze steady. Maybe that is exactly why you're the one who can. Mabel stared out at the dark fields beyond the fence. Somewhere out there, coyotes called to each other. But for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid of the dark. Because inside the house there was light again. The storm hit without any warning. Wind howled through the valley, bending trees and banging shutters against the walls. Rain hammered on the roof like an army trying to break in. Ida Mabel stood in the doorway, holding the frame as lightning flashed over the distant hills. Stay inside, she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. The girls huddled together near the fireplace, eyes wide. Teodoro ran past her toward the barn. The horses, he yelled. If the doors give way, they could break their legs. Without a second thought, Mabel grabbed her shawl and ran after him. The rain was cold and heavy, soaking her dress in seconds. Mud tugged at her boots as she reached the barn. Teodoro was struggling to tie the gate shut, his hands slipping on the wet rope. Together, they pushed until the big doors slammed closed. For a moment, they just stood there, breathless, faces close, the storm raging around them. You didn't have to come out here, he said. Mabel wiped water from her face. You would have done the same for me. Lightning cracked again, bright and fierce. The horses stomped nervously. Teodoro took her hand. Come on, he said. We'll wait it out inside. By the time they got back, the girls had built a small fire in the kitchen. Luna was crying softly, clutching a stuffed toy donkey. Mabel knelt and pulled her close. It's only rain, sweetheart, she whispered. This house is strong. The night seemed to last forever. Thunder rolled over the hills like distant drums. Mabel sang softly, an old song her mother used to hum. The words didn't matter much. The sound alone was a comfort. One by one, the girls fell asleep leaning against her. When dawn finally broke, the storm had moved on. The ranch was a mess. Fences were bent, branches were scattered everywhere, but it was still standing. And so were they. Teodoro came in from checking the damage, his hat dripping. We lost a few fence posts, but the animals are fine, he said. It could have been much worse. Mabel poured him a cup of coffee. We'll fix it. He nodded. We will. His eyes stayed on her for a moment. You kept them safe. They keep me safe, she said softly. Later that morning, Lee came running from the garden. The plants, she cried. Mabel followed her outside. Rows of damp soil stretched before them, torn up by the wind. Most of the new seedlings were gone. Lee dropped to her knees, tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. They're ruined. Mabel knelt beside her. Not ruined, she said, brushing her hand across the mud. Some of the roots are still alive. Lee shook her head. You don't know that. I do know, Mabel said. The land always gives something back if you don't give up on it. Together, they worked to save what they could, replanting the seeds that hadn't washed away. Soon Sarah and Noah joined them, followed by Luna carrying a bucket of water almost too big for her small arms. Even Teodoro came, hammering the broken posts back into place. By afternoon, the garden looked like itself again, not perfect but alive. That night after dinner, Teodoro sat beside Mabel on the porch. The air was cool and fresh after the rain. Stars began to twinkle through the parting clouds. You know, he said, you've changed this place. Mabel offered a faint smile. No, this place changed me. He looked at her hands, scarred, steady, gentle. When I first saw you on that road, I didn't know why I stopped. I just knew I couldn't leave you there. Now I think maybe that was the day everything began again. She turned her gaze to the dark fields. You don't owe me anything, Teodoro. He shook his head. Maybe not, but I'm thankful all the same. A comfortable quiet settled between them, not empty but full. Somewhere inside the house, one of the girls laughed softly in her sleep. Weeks passed and the ranch began to heal. The garden sprouted green once more. Lee taught Luna how to read. Sarah learned to carve little wooden animals. Noah started painting the old barn walls with bright colors, flowers, birds, and sunshine. The house didn't echo with emptiness anymore. It was full of life. Then one morning, as Mabel hung laundry in the yard, a rider appeared down the road. She narrowed her eyes. The horse wasn't familiar. When the man stopped by the gate, Mabel's stomach clenched. It was Barollo Cortez, the man who had cheated Teodoro years before. His smile was slick as oil. Heard the Espinosa ranch got itself a new woman in charge, he said. Thought I'd come offer my congratulations. Teodoro came out of the barn, his expression hard. You're not welcome here. Barollo shrugged. Business is business, old friend. I came to collect what you owe. You stole from me, Teodoro said. The only thing you get from me is the dust on your boots. Barollo's eyes slid toward Mabel. Maybe she could make things right. A woman like that knows the value of a peaceful life. Mabel's hands tightened, but her voice stayed calm. I know the value of honest work. You wouldn't understand that, he smirked. Careful now. Not everyone likes a woman who talks like a man. Before Teodoro could move, Mabel stepped forward. And not everyone gets to say that to me twice. Something in her tone made him flinch. He spat on the ground and climbed back onto his horse. This place won't last, he said. Then I guess you'll be disappointed, Mabel replied. As he rode away, the dust he kicked up settled slowly, but the determination he left behind did not fade. That evening, Mabel stood in the garden, looking at the small green shoots pushing through the soil once more. Teodoro joined her. He'll be back, she said. I know, we'll be ready, he nodded. We always are. The sun dipped low, setting the sky on fire with gold. Mabel took a deep breath of clean earth and air. She thought of the long, dusty road that had brought her here, of the ugly word thief that once followed her, of the girl's laughter now spilling from the porch. She wasn't the woman who had begged God not to die alone on a deserted road anymore. She was the woman who had helped build a home from dust and hope. Teodoro watched her for another moment, then said quietly, "You needed a roof." I needed someone who wouldn't run. Looks like we both found what we were looking for. Mabel smiled, her eyes shining in the fading light. No, she said softly, we got more than that. We got a family. And as the last light faded over the ranch, the wind carried the gentle sound of laughter, the kind that takes root and stays. If this story of resilience and finding home touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Help us share more tales like this by hitting that subscribe button and giving the video a thumbs up. Sharing it with a friend makes all the difference. Thank you for watching video a thumbs up. Sharing it with a friend makes all the difference. Thank you for watching.